All right. I mean, we got pushing 25 people logged on, so I'll go ahead and get things started. Welcome, everybody. Coming to you live from the vaccinated TBFC studios in Lutz, Florida. We have Dr. Bob speaking tonight. He's going to be talking on some of the research he's done for one of the chapters in a new book he has coming out, hopefully within the next 4 to 6 months. We will have Dr. Bob back at sometime in the future when that book is released. Start talking right off the bat. We'll talk about the Peace River mini adventure that did not happen. All I can do is apologize to folks. On Thursday before the event, the river was up 4 feet past where it needed to be and the water was rising. I had to make a call, and at the time the campgrounds was willing to give people their deposits back if they didn't want to go. So I had to make the call to cancel it. And of course, the river, Fred Hendershot, myself, some other people looked at it and all decided there's no way this river is going to be workable. And the river fell faster than we've ever seen the river fall. And it turned out to be not a bad weekend for those who stayed and they were able to hunt. So all we can do is apologize. We had to make a call based on the people getting their deposits back. But it was a good weekend and everybody that did go had a good time. So all we can do is say we're sorry about that. We're trying. It seems like something's always in our way, trying to get events pulled off this year, but hopefully next year will bring better times. I'll tell you, I've spoken with USF regarding our room for the in-person meetings, and I don't have good news, but they did tell me they're going to let us know in August. So that's better than telling us no right off the bat. So we might have some live meetings starting again in the fall and September when TBFC gets back together. I want to ask you guys, remind you to please try to keep your membership dues up to date. A lot of folks have asked if we have if they're annual. They're annual as far as being for you when you sign up. A lot of clubs do it every January. We don't. We keep track of it from the day you join to a year later. If you do join, you get the nice newsletter. We don't post these online or have these available anywhere else. And the newsletters are doing very, very well. We have a lot of cool stories in them from Dr. Bob every month. In Touch with Inverts by Rob. We got paleo analysis stories every month. Really cool one this month on why the not the gazelle, the antelope, why it runs so fast when it really has no predators to make it run that fast anymore. But please check it out. Only members get this. We really appreciate your membership. If you haven't joined TBFC, I know some clubs are strictly online Facebook clubs. We do have a real membership you can join. It's $25 a year for a person or a family. We'd appreciate that. I don't have a lot of, being it's our last meeting of the season. We run from September through May of each year, and being as this is our last meeting, I don't have a lot of stuff to talk about. There will be one last field trip, which looks like it should be okay with what the rain is forecasted. Fred Hendershot will be taking folks into the Peace River on May 22nd. He's going into Brownsville, I believe it's in the newsletter. Not your last time to go, but your last time to go with us. And as long as the water stays down low and safe, you can continue hunting in the Peace. If you scuba dive, there's lots of rivers you can go to, but if you're a screener, the Peace River is a good place to go. And please try to hit that before the rains come. May is traditionally a pretty dry month, so we should be okay. I have 4 prizes tonight to give out. I'll show them now, but I'm only going to give my phone number out once because we do it old school. You call in, a certain number of caller wins a prize, and you all hear it live, so you'll know I'm not just giving it to my nieces and nephews, although one of them did win last month. But I'm only going to give the number once, and I'll give it after the speaker, after Dr. Bob, because Eileen has to scrub the number off the, she doesn't want to post it, which I appreciate on the final YouTube presentation. So she'll only have to do it once, but we have a pen and pencil ready. I'll give out the phone number after the presentation. So it's a partial, but it's a crocodile scoop, which is kind of rare. You find a lot of alligator, not a lot of crocodile. This is a legally obtained from land, a land site. It's a prehistoric Indian, looks like an adze, I think it is. Pretty cool. We have a replica of pterodactyl. So it is a replica. It's not $1 million piece. And it's out of plaster, so it's only got one drop in it. That's on you. And the last one's pretty cool. It's called Eoraptor. It's a little miniature skull from I guess, is that a pterosaur, an Eoraptor, or is that no ground on the ground?
Like an early raptor.
Yeah. So and it's not a reduced or a reduced size. It says that the animal is only 3 feet long. So this is the actual size of the skull, and it's a pretty nice replica. So we'll have those at the end of the meeting here. Dr. Bob, as everybody knows, is famous for being one of the smartest guys in the club, but being technologically terrible, challenged. So he's come over to our house to TBFC Studios here in Lutz, Florida, and he's going to switch seats with me here in a moment. I don't want to hear get any texts from, hey, why don't you guys wear your mask? Because everybody in my house is vaccinated now. So we're all good to go. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Bob. And we have to do some quick computer switching here. So Eileen, you want to do what you need to do?
Sina knows what to do.
Oh, sorry.
We're here. We're getting ready to crank up. I got to put on the cheaters for when we get the screen up. All right, I think we're up. We're ready to go. I got 2 thumbs up, so I think we can start. And I'm good to go. Then tonight's topic is on Pleistocene Survivors, and a presentation that represents just a small excerpt from my upcoming book, Ice Age Florida. It's a book I did with Herman Trapman, who's a paleo artist. He took care of all the artwork, and I did the bulk of the writing. There's a few things that Herman wrote, because he's also very, very knowledgeable about Ice Age Florida. The presentation you're going to see tonight is only part 2 of chapter 29, and the book has about 31 or 32 chapters, and I'm hoping it's out in about 4, 5, 6 months, depending. It's done. It's been formatted. I found some mild errors in the book that I want to correct, typo kind of things, and a few formatting things. So other than that, we are good to go. When we think of Ice Age Florida, we think of large glaciers, woolly mammoths, frozen landscapes, and a world very different than what we live in today. And the picture to the left on your screen, 18,000 years ago, you can see the glaciers covered massive portions of North America, because that's what we're dealing with. We're going to talk about Florida, not talking about Europe or whatever. And if you look at that picture on the left, you can see that Florida is twice as wide as it is today. So Florida was a big, huge land mass. And we don't usually think about that. We think about those frozen tundra and stuff. So we may also think of dire wolves, saber cats, mastodons, glyptodonts, giant ground sloths, bison, ice age horses, and a menagerie of other beasts that are now no longer with us. The picture here it's a little bit blurry because I blew it up off a little thumbnail picture. It's a Charles R. Knight mural that used to hang in the American Museum of Natural History in New York, done at the turn of the last century. And other than the megafauna, the Florida landscape, however, was very similar to today's landscape. I mean, the Florida was wider, but the way Florida looked, the kind of trees and the flora and that kind of stuff was very, very similar. What we rarely think of is white-tailed deer and a host of other Ice Age survivors that are still with us today. We don't think about those animals. And their often overlooked story is so important. And I remember digging at Lycée 30 years ago, and the first time I found a partial deer jaw, I showed it to somebody and said, oh, that's a partial deer jaw. And I was really green. I had no idea what I was doing. And I said, well, what kind of deer? And I said, oh, white-tailed deer like today. And I was so shocked that 1.8 million years ago, which is what Lysy was dated at least at that time, the white-tailed deer that we have today is the same deer that they had 1.8 million years ago. This is a long-term survivor. So let's back up a little bit. At the end of the last ice age, there was a mass extinction of the megafauna in North America. And much of the rest of the world also went through those extinction events, except for the African continent, which only lost about 15% of its megafauna. We'll go a little bit into the reason for that later. A large portion of all terrestrial animals weighing over 44 kilograms or 97 pounds died out. Now, most people just use that 100-pound kind of marker. So everything over 100 pounds, a huge portion of those animals went out. Now, this is a picture. Well, this is one of the Herman Trapman illustrations from the upcoming book. Obviously, it's a Columbian mammoth. And you can see that the Florida landscape is not a whole lot different than what we would think of it today as an open savanna area. You got some pine trees in the background. And if you look at the Columbian mammoth, it's really similar, except a little bit larger than the woolly mammoth. But they don't believe, and we won't know because that kind of thing doesn't fossilize, we don't believe it had the hair like a woolly mammoth. Its skin and its texture were more like today's African or Asian elephants. So North America might have been the hardest hit continent when the megafaunal extinctions occurred. Almost 90 genera containing 75% of the megafaunal animals were gone by 12,700 years ago. Along with the animals from Florida, other parts of North America lost the scrub ox, the stag moose, the saiga, Harlan's muskox, 13 species of pronghorn, and the 9-foot-long saber-toothed salmon that's pictured on the left here. Now, that salmon was from the Pacific Northwest, and it was just a large critter that obviously weighed over that 100 pounds or 44 kilograms. So what caused those ice age megafaunal extinctions? Many theories have been postulated for the extinctions. The four major ones are overhunting, sometimes called the overkill hypothesis, severe climate change, spread of disease, and extraterrestrial impact. The causes may not have been mutually exclusive. 2, 3, or all 4 of them may have contributed to the megafaunal extinctions in a perfect storm type of scenario. We may never know for sure what caused the megafaunal extinctions of the last ice age and why. And the other thing we may never know is we can kind of speculate. That's what this presentation about is why they didn't affect the survivors so much. If you look at the overhunting overkill, it's hard to totally accept that one as it is because you have a group of, say it's Clovis or early Paleo people coming across the land bridge. Their herds are in the millions. They would have had to have been gorging themselves and would have had to multiply so fast. You just can't accept that. But if you look at that third cause, a spread of disease, that may have went with that human incursion that came across with their dogs. And if they spread disease, similar to when the Spanish first came to this continent, disease was the biggest cause of death for Native Americans, more than them being killed by the Spanish outright. Severe climate change is hard to accept because we think of the ice age as a single event, but there were 17 glacials and interglacials in that last ice age. And the animals survived all those severe climate changes during those glacials and interglacials. Next slide. One that's starting to get a little more credibility, or gaining credibility, is an extraterrestrial impact. Now, people say, well, where's the crater like Chicxulub when the dinosaurs went? Well, there might not be the remnants of a large crater from the impact, like the extinction of the dinosaurs. Perhaps a meteor or comet broke up in the outer atmosphere or even out in space and showered the landscape over many years as the Earth passed through its path several times, similar to what happened to Jupiter, I don't know, what it was 8 or 10 years ago, when it was getting hit with impacts from a comet or whatever that broke up. Now that could have some severe devastational effects. When we talk about the end of the ice age, we rarely talk about those survivors. Why don't we ever talk about them? Most of those survivors were not big. They weren't exotic. They're mostly common animals we still find in today's environment. And many people, like myself, when I was hunting lice, don't even realize they were alive during the last ice age. Why should we be talking about them? They're often overlooked stories, important because they are the ones who made it through the ice age mass extinction event. During our current mass extinction event, we should be looking at why the survivors made it through the last mass extinction event. Our current situation, as many people may know, is now referred to as the sixth extinction. There were 5 other major mass extinctions that naturally occurred going all the way back to several hundreds of millions of years ago, up to this last one, which is probably within the last 200 or 300 years, where man actually realizes that he's causing a mass extinction through pollution and reduction of habitat and a million things that are going on. It's interesting to note that the dodo bird, which we always think of as dumb as a dodo because they weren't believed to be very smart, when it was found on Mauritius, it was an isolated little island that had never had any predators. So when sailors got trapped there or stranded there, they could literally just walk up to these birds, walk right up to them, bop them on the head, cook them up and fry them up. And they started using Mauritius as a port. And within a short amount of time, by using up the eggs, killing the birds, there were no longer any dodo birds left. And it was the first time that man realized, and I think it was at 1600 at some point, late 1600s, man realized that he was absolutely the cause of an animal going extinct. So we know it's less than 300 or 400 years that this mass extinction, but it's way accelerated right now. Those of us who have been fossil hunting in Florida for any length of time have found numerous remains, I should have put fossil remains, of critters that are still with us today. Many times it's difficult to tell if those remains are fully fossilized or relatively recent remains. Deer and alligator remains found in rivers are the most problematic in Florida to determine if they are fossilized or not. And they're very common finds. In the picture, you're going to see some white-tailed deer, Odiocoiles virginianus, and there's both juvenile jaws, but what's unique about these, the top jaw was found in Steinhatchee and the bottom was found in Santa Fe. I guess I should have labeled them the other way around. Both of those exhibit bite marks on the jaw. You can see very clearly the bite marks on the back of the jaw of those little baby deer. And if you look at in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see they're only 4 inches long. And a full-size deer jaw would be probably 8 inches or maybe longer. There were at least 4 other large animals that survived the Ice Age extinction events in Florida. All of them exceed the 44 kilogram, 97 pound mega-faunal criteria. The American black bear, the alligator, Florida panther, and manatee. And some of these are really, really large critters, but they made it through that mass extinction event. Most of the other animals that made it through were much, much smaller. The white-tailed deer is kind of an in-betweener. The female deers sometimes are smaller than 100 pounds. Male deers can be significantly bigger than 100 pounds. If you go back one, please, sorry. In this picture, you're looking at some black bear teeth. You're looking at a lower molar on the top of the picture and a lower canine on the bottom. American black bear teeth can be found in Pleistocene deposits. So we know the American black bear was alive back in the Pleistocene, along with 2 other bears, Arctodus simus and Tremarctos floridanus. Now, the Arctodus simus is a recent find by Mike and Sina Searle that got published on because we weren't sure they made them down into Florida, but their finds in the Rainbow River capped it that those bears were actually made it this far south. So there are 3 large bears that are alive in Pleistocene, Florida. Only the American black bear made it through. We'll look at why in a little bit. Alligator fossils are a common find. Gator teeth and scutes are amongst the most common finds for those hunting in Florida rivers. On the left are some nice alligator scutes from Peace River, from a bank in the Peace River I used to pull them out of, and I think the one on the right is actually from Santa Fe River. You got some alligator teeth from Steinhatchee on the right-hand side. They're fairly big. 1.25 inches is a fairly big tooth. And I think I have maybe a couple dozen that are that size, and that seems a little unusual. So I had to be a very, very big gator. Again, really tough to tell because a lot of times we'll find alligator material and it won't be fully fossilized. And you pull it out of the river, you wait a week or two, and it just starts deteriorating because it hasn't completely mineralized yet. But alligators were alive in rivers back then, and they're alive now. And the alligator is one of the slower animals that evolved. In other words, alligators, as you go back, there's some differentiated alligators, and there you have to be an expert to tell one type of Florida alligator from the previous lineages as you go back into the Pliocene, Miocene, and so forth backwards. Manatee teeth, another common find. And if you look on the right is artwork by Herman, and his artwork is so good, it almost looks like a photograph. He's just unbelievable. He does everything computerized now. On the left-hand side, you see the teeth. The teeth on the upper part of the slide are the uppers, and the lower part of the slide are lowers. They're from the Santa Fe River. Andreas Kerner and myself often found pockets of manatee. When we were hunting Santa Fe back in the day, we would find pockets of manatee teeth numbering in the scores. When we found these kind of bluish gray ones, I want to say I found like 45, 50, 55, and Andreas found about 80. We went on another dive where we found some yellowish ones, and he found like 160, and I think I found 60 or 70. So when you'd find these pockets, and we believed that we were finding so many a pocket it was the remains of a prehistoric spring where they may have wintered, came in for the winter to stay warm during really, really bad cold snaps, and they stayed near that spring that was 72 for extended periods of time. And they continue to eat vegetation and lose teeth in these concentrated areas. Not so common, the Florida panther material. Now, for me, it was even harder to find was a free picture of a living Florida panther. All of them had the stuff when you tried to download it, it had like a bar going across it to try to whatever. So I gave up on finally trying to find a free download. I know Mike and them could have done it in a heartbeat, but for me, it was just beyond my technological ability. Now, everyone needs to get a pen and paper out, and I'll go slow. Puma concolor is a panther. The extinct American lion is also a type of panther. So understand, the puma and the lion are panthers. Panthera atrox, however, is a jaguar. The saber-toothed tiger was not a tiger. The cougar or mountain lion is actually a puma. The bobcat is actually a lynx. And the leopard is actually a cheetah. To say the big cats are very confusing is an understatement. And Andreas Kerner had to help me through with the cat portion of my upcoming book because I just couldn't, it just blew my mind. And we believe what happened was as the earliest finds, paleontological finds were found in Florida, scientists were naming these animals, these cats, by different names. However, once they're given that name, a genus and a species, it has priority. As more material came in, they began to realize that the puma was really a panther, but the name already had priority. The American lion was already a panther. The saber-tooth, the panther was actually jaguar, so on and so forth. But the names, the scientific names stuck. So the scientific names don't match the common names at all. Very confusing. So hopefully everyone got that straight now, and we can move on. Many species only went extinct through local extinctions. The horse went extinct in North America, okay? But across the Bering Land Bridge and eventually made it into Asia and then eventually Africa. So it survived, but as a mega-faunal species, it went extinct in North America. Now, on the right-hand side, you're seeing a maxilla, which is the upper part of a jaw, and there's 5 teeth in it, very, very old. The little pre-molars onto the right side of that jaw are very worn down, right down to the gum line, and there's only 1 premolar missing, so 5 out of the 6 teeth were there. That was the Withlacoochee River find that Terry Solari took me on. I don't know what year, it's got to be 15, 20 years ago, and still to this day, the best dive I was ever on. I logged in, I want to say 150, 180 specimens. I could not swipe the water without finding 3 or 4 horse teeth, the mastodon teeth, beaver teeth, camel teeth, it just went on and on. On the left-hand side, you're seeing a complete foot of a horse. And this came out of the Peace River maybe 3 years ago. And because right now I'm in right around the 9,000, I'm still under 10,000 log specimens. And that one goes from 7,963 to 7,966. You're seeing a cannon bone on top, which is actually a foot bone, 1-2 digits of the toe, and the actual hoof core. The horse hoof core was something on my bucket list. I always wanted, I found tons of broken ones, but I'd never found a complete one. And I went on a dive with Rick Cochran, and I started to find the parts of the cannon bone. And in the piece, it's really common to find slivers of bone and nothing ever goes together. And the first couple pieces I probably fanned out, I probably did not collect properly, unfortunately, and I'm usually pretty good about that. But once I realized it was all going to go together, I tried to then go back and pick it all up. Next thing you know, 1 digit, 2 digits, and the hoof came out, and it made a complete foot, which is very, very cool. The tapir is another one that went extinct in North America, but they survived in Asia and South America. Okay, and anything that went over to Asia went across the Bering Land Bridge from Alaska to kind of what is Russia now into Asia. The things that go to South America come from North America, and they go off what now we call the Isthmus of Panama, when that all connected. And they call that the Great the Great American Interchange, where animals interchanged from North to South America. It's another Herman Trapman artwork for the book. And if you look at the baby tapir in the picture, it's striped with some spots. All the baby tapirs, both in South America and in Asia, that split lineages literally hundreds of thousands of years ago, baby tapirs are all colored like that. So he made the baby tapir that would have been alive in North America or in Florida colored like that. If you're looking on the left-hand side, you see a really nice baby tapir jaw I found in the Rainbow River. And I got part of the other side of the jaw. There's a bunch of juvenile unfused bones, toe bones, digits, so on and so forth. It's just a beautiful specimen. And back, I don't know if it's 7, 8, 10 years ago, Mike had invited Dr. Holbert to come down, and he came and went through Mike and Sina's collection and took all these fossils that he donated. Then he came over to my house in St. Pete, and I told him to take whatever he wanted. And I was so afraid he was going to take this baby tapir jaw, which I just love. And I said, and I know Holbert was in love with tapirs. I said, you don't need this baby tapir jaw. And he said, no, I just got a complete one for Mike and Sina. I was like, thank you. I'm glad, so glad they went to their house first. Anyway, next slide. Camels and llamas also went extinct in North America, but they survived in other continents. Camels crossed over into Asia, and llamas headed south to South America. The two different land bridges again. Their body parts are extremely similar. Camel toe bones, llama toe bones, and in fact, the prehistoric ones from Florida, we have Paleolama mirifica and Hemiocania was the bigger one. Hemiocania macrocephala, which just means large-brained. They're not sure if they were camels or llamas, and if the big one was a camel, since the humps don't fossilize, it may not have had a hump. We just don't know. To the right, you're seeing a nice camel toe bone that I found in the Peace River back in, looks like it's the 6th of 99. So all my fossils get labeled. That was 2,785. And I've got a ton of camel toe bones along the line. Many smaller animals survived the Pleistocene extinction event in Florida. As previously stated, their story is equally as important to tell as those that went extinct. Many paleontologists often focus on the reasons for the extinction events and who lost the battle of time, often overlooked other survivors and how they managed to make it through to the other side of the mass extinction. Rodents are one of the few exceptions that paleontologists will really focus on, because the smaller the mammal, the faster it evolves. So they focus on finding fine sediments in a paleontological context and finding those rodent fossils, because it can really, really narrow down the time frame. So instead of just saying the Pleistocene, which is like a 2 million year slice, they can knock it down to smaller time segments, Blanken, Irvingtonian, so on and so forth, by looking at those really small rodent fossils. Other survivors that are often overlooked. Nobody really talks about offshore or inshore marine animals. Terrestrial flora, the plants and the trees and flowering plants and shrubs and pines and stuff. They don't really talk about it. Now, it's a good chance that most of those made it through the Pleistocene Ice Age extinctions, because as the ice ages moved, terrestrial flora migrated. Now, we always think of migrations like in Africa, these zebra going hundreds of miles looking for water, and elephants migrating, and so on and so forth, or large bird migrations that go from Canada, Canadian geese, all the way down to Florida. We don't think of plants as migrating, but as those ice ages, those big, huge ice sheets came down, trees, it's a slow motion migration, and trees slowly migrated into this larger peninsula of Florida. As the ice sheets and glaciers receded, they slowly migrated back up north. The problem today is the climate change is so rapid that it's not going to have time for these plants, or especially large forests, to migrate. The other thing is humans have totally changed the landscape. There's no place for them to migrate to, because if it comes up as a plant somewhere and Florida plant finally starts cropping up in Georgia or North Carolina, it just gets plowed under. No place for those plants to go. Populations of insects, totally understudied and overlooked. Amphibians, especially smaller ones. No one's really studying those things. All kinds of other smaller life forms. Most are little studied or little understood. Then the size and soft-bodied natures of many of the plants, animals, and insects also do not preserve well. Many paleontologists believe marine shelled animals should have had their own time period, but are often shoehorned in terrestrial time periods. So when we look at that marine, the very top part of the screen, offshore and inshore marine animals, we put them into Pleistocene, Pliocene, Miocene, but their time frames of when those animals and shelled animals, oysters and this and that, and clams and whatever, very, very different time frame. White-tailed deer. So now we're back to that white-tailed deer. So we're going to start with the white-tailed deer when we're looking at the survivors. Deer remains in the rivers are one of the most numerous, actually more numerous than horse remains, especially if you go into northern Florida rivers. But they're often not fossilized. This animal range is widely over the North American continent. So you're looking at, to the right, you're looking at just a pile of partial deer jaws from the Steenhatchee from one little section of river that's, I don't know, half the size of a football field. And there's just tons of deer jaws in there. Those are the fossilized ones. That's not counting all the ones that I pulled out that weren't fossilized. On the left, way down in the sediment, I found the top of this deer skull. And to the right of the deer skull, you can see the two platforms that had shed its antler. So you would know exactly what time this deer died in the past, you know, in the early Pleistocene or whatever. So next slide. Coyote. Coyote is still with us today and one of the few carnivores that can live in fairly close contact with humans. You can see the coyote jaws with some an astragalus in between the two jaws, sized next to a 1936 Walking Liberty $50. The coyote has a wide range of habitat, and they're both a scavenger and an omnivore. Those are good traits if you want to survive catastrophes. So now we're going through the survivors. The Virginia opossum. There's some possum lower jaws. These are from Rainbow River Springs. And you can see both sides of the jaw. One's got the canine in it, one doesn't. Both of them are missing something somewhere and busted up a little bit. And it's another critter that can live in close contact with humans. Wide range. It has a wide range of habitat. Doesn't get quite as far north as, say, coyotes have gone. Somewhere in Virginia or whatever, which I guess why it's called a Virginia opossum. And but again, an omnivore and a scavenger. The bobcat. It's a smaller cat that has a wide habitat range, but it, unlike other cats, or well, I should say like most cats in the wild, it stays away from human contact. It's hard to see a bobcat in the wild. It's not possible. I've seen one once in my life. Ooh. You got a cat jaw on the right, and it's not a big. It's bigger than your house cat, but it's not a big cat at all. The 9-banded armadillo, our friend the armadillo. So you can see a couple armadillo scoots next to that Indian 1887 Indian head penny found on a Peace River adventure trip. One of the only coins I've ever found in a river that was an older coin. The scoot that's underneath the Indian head penny would have come from the top of the head, if you look really careful, or possibly the front or back of the shell. The longer scoots are from the banded part of the armadillo. And although it never learned to cross the road safely, and it's nocturnal, and it eats a wide variety of bugs, grubs, etc. So he's still right now with us today. River otter. Primarily a fish-eating carnivore, its food supply might not have been as much affected at the end of the Ice Age as some of the other critters. Now it's pictured next to an 1835 halfpenny, which when I was reviewing this before I did the presentation, I realized it's not the best size gauge because people don't realize how big a halfpenny is. It's about the size of a quarter, maybe even a little bigger than a quarter. So I should have put a little bit more of a common coin in there for you to figure out the size. But you can see by its teeth that it's pretty much a carnivore kind of animal. It's not an omnivore. It may have eaten some other stuff, but it's pretty much eating fish and or aquatic animals. The beaver. Now, this is the Canadensis. This is the beaver that's with us today. It survived. Now, there was a giant beaver that went extinct at the end of the Ice Age. If you look at the bone on the left, that's a femur from one of today's beavers. It's not very big. It's next to a Morgan 1778 Morgan dollar. It had beavers have a wide, they go from Canada all the way to Florida. They have a wide range of both habitat and they eat a wide range of plant foods and whatever else they're chewing on. If you look at the bone in the picture, you can see the prominent line on the joint to the right. So that was from a juvenile beaver, but it wouldn't have gotten much bigger because the other parts of the bone are fused. When I first found that bone, I had never found that part of a giant beaver or a regular beaver. I was like, wow, this is just a really unique. And when I went to look up in my mammal bone morphology book, there's no questioning what a giant beaver or a regular beaver even femur looks like. It's the only one that looks anything remotely like that. It was a slam dunk. So they were looking, oh, okay, that's a beaver. Next slide. Skunks, a smaller survivor. However, they're beginning to struggle today for survival. They have a wide habitat range. They go all the way from up north down into Florida. They're both a scavenger and omnivore. They're nocturnal. They stay away from people. But because of habitat loss, the ones that are so away from people are going to struggle more because they're losing habitat as opposed to a coyote or some of these other ones that still can kind of live, the possum that can still live in neighborhoods. These animals don't unless you're really rural. And you can see it compared to the person's hand. Skunk jaw is a relatively small thing. Rabbits. Common find when working deposits of fine sediments. They have extremely wide range of habitat, and they're a prolific breeder. And we know that about rabbits. So one of the things is rabbit population, there'll be places where they're considered a nuisance, and they'll poison them and do everything else in the neighborhood. And within a few years, they're back and they're eating people's home gardens and lawns and whatever else. So rabbits are pretty prolific. They've bounced back and they survived. It's pictured next to a 2-cent piece. I didn't write down what year it's from. 2-cent piece is a little, about the size of a quarter also, maybe a slightly smaller than a quarter. So they're not very big, the jaws on them. Raccoon, a long-term survivor. They go way back into the Pleistocene through today. Wide habitat range, and they're an omnivore and kind of a scavenger also. And if you look at the dentition on the jaw on the right, you can see the pointy teeth in the front. And I used to tell my students, pointy teeth eat meat. flat teeth eat plants. So you get those flat teeth in the back. So it's a typical omnivore type jaw. The more types of materials you eat, better chances of you having long-term survival, especially during catastrophes. I thought it was a cute picture there. Another small carnivore that's going to struggle in the future, even though they have a wide-ranging habitat, and its food source was little affected at the end of the Ice Age because they're eating rodents and very small mammals that all made it through. When I first moved to St. Pete, there were fox in St. Pete. I haven't seen a fox in St. Pete in 30 years, 35 years probably. That's since the last time I've seen now. In that, maybe northern Pinellas County, there's still some somewhere, but I guarantee there's no fox anywhere in St. Pete unless you go maybe down in that Lake McGorry, which is a pretty big nature kind of preserve-ish park. So they're going to struggle, I think, in the future. Numerous birds. There are some birds that went extinct at the end of the terminal ice age, the giant condor and some other ones, but the majority of the birds made it through. They were one of the biggest survivors as far as number of genus and species of the late ice age extinctions. And again, of course, they're way below that 100-pound weight thing. Most species survive for a plethora of reasons. They have a wide range. Some of them are migratory. They're prolific breeders. However, many of them are starting to struggle now because of that loss of habitat. There for a while in the 60s and 70s, you had DDT and some other pesticides. Now you still have large farms that are using new versions of different pesticides and this and that. And so it's an ibis you see on the picture, and the bone is a wood ibis tarso, which is a kind of a foot bone. There would have been 3 toes off the right end thing that's pointing upward. I found that in the Steinhatchee River, way, way down in a crack. Bird material is really hard to find whole unless you find a really fine sediments that haven't moved far. Rainbow is kind of famous for finding a lot of bird material. I want to say that's the only bird bone I have found in the Steinhatchee River, and I have property up there, so I dive back quite a bit. It's almost 5.5 inches long, that bone, so that's pretty long for a thin bone to survive in one piece. Eagle claw, a rare find of another survivor. So I only found this less than a month ago, so I had to stick this into the presentation just late. It was a recent find I just had to add. It's only the second raptor claw I found in 30 years of diving. You can look at it next to a $50. That's a big claw. That's like a toenail or a fingernail. So eagles had big hands or claws. If you've ever seen one in person, they're just massive, and they would stick those talons into you. Super killer find. I found that in the Rainbow, like I said, less than a month ago. And I put it next to a $50 because it has the big eagle on the back. It's Walking Liberty $50. 1920. Numerous turtles survive. Turtle material has got to be overall turtle material, meaning all the various kinds and species, got to be the most common find in Florida rivers, even in dig sites. At Lacey, you would find so much turtle material, you'd almost stop picking it up. I want to say in the picture, there's pictured 9 different types of shell, different types of turtle shell in those pictures. And in the little skull to the right is only about I want to say it's an inch, maybe an inch and a quarter long. It's a really small turtle skull, probably a little slider or something. Turtles and tortoises are long-term survivors. Just like your gators, I guess because they're aquatic reptiles, they haven't changed in millennia. They have a wide range, aquatic lifestyle. Food sources may not have been affected as much as the mammals and the things that were living on land. Numerous snakes survive. Now, if you get those really fine sediments, Lacey was common. You could find snake vertebrae. I have found them in the Peace and in Santa Fe and other things. These ones are from the Rainbow. They're next to, I think, a 37 buffalo nickel. Most snakes, to our knowledge, made it through the Ice Age extinctions. They were cold-blooded animals like your alligators and your turtles. And cold-blooded animals have a better chance to survive catastrophic events. They can go for weeks or months without eating if they have to and still have a chance to survive. That's a huge advantage over warm-blooded animals. Numerous bats survive. Now, the giant vampire bat, which is pictured on the left, that's some artwork from Herman there, it didn't make it through the Ice Age extinctions, but most of the other bats did. Bats have a wide range, nocturnal lifestyle. The food sources were probably not affected because a lot of them were insectivores. We already talked about the insects may not have been affected at all at the terminal ice age. And a lot of the other ones are fructivores. So they're eating different kinds of fruits or whatever, and just wild fruits or wild berries and whatever they're digging up. So, or scavenging on. So if you look at the giant vampire bat, like Desmodus magnus, it didn't have a common name. I gave it the common name giant vampire bat because in the book, there's a story about a giant vampire bat, and I couldn't just keep calling it Desmodus magnus over and over again, and it just disrupted the story. So I called it the giant vampire bat. Maybe the name will stick and I'll get credit for doing something in my life. Numerous fish probably made it through. All the common fish appear to have been unfazed by the terminal ice age extinctions. Fish have a wide range, aquatic marine habitat. Food sources were probably unaffected for the most part. They may have had little local extinctions where different ponds or a river dried up or something like that. But overall, the fish made it. If you look at the garfish scales on the left, those are from Lyce. I have a slab of White River Badland, which I want to say is early Eocene, White River Badland matrix. The garfish scales look almost exactly the same. The garfish has not changed much in tens of millions of years. You got two fish jaws to the right. I could not tell you. One's obviously from a very small fish, one's from a big one. They're both from the Santa Fe River. And I don't know, 25 years ago, I found a site where there were so many fish scales, fish jaws, fish vertebrae, both parts of the fins and this and that, that they believe it might have been an early paleo fishing type of camp or something. Hard to say. Ultimate survivor. Humans are the ultimate survivor, and we're going to get to that in a second. One of the things we don't know is, did the first paleo people go extinct? Did they become culturally advanced all of a sudden? Did they become assimilated into later cultures entering the area? We may never know. Florida's first people, either they went extinct or they radically changed their way of making a living at the end of the Ice Age. And to the point where they went from these large Clovis points and paleo points to stemmed archaic points. It seems like almost overnight. I know it may have taken longer than that, but we'll never really be sure if they just totally assimilated, culturally changed, or did those people actually go that were making their living off hunting mammoths and mastodons and horses just kind of phase out, and other people, archaic peoples, came into Florida, but we may never know that. So there was an additional pressure on survivors. There was always a human presence, whether those first ones went extinct and other archaic Indians came in, or whether they just totally changed their way of making living. There was always a human presence in Florida before, during, and after the mega-faunal extinctions. So those animals that did survive the Ice Age mass extinctions events should have had more hunting pressure on them. Same for the harvesting of marine life. And yet somehow they all survived. Phenomena that has not been fully explained yet, and it makes one further question the overkill overhunting hypothesis. Why did the creatures that survive? Many of these creatures were generalists of one kind or another. Bears, skunks, possums, coyotes, alligator, fox. They eat a wide variety of foods. They're omnivores and/or scavengers. Many, like the white-tailed deer, most birds, snakes, bats, bobcats, beaver, some of those mentioned above, live over extremely large geographical territories where they may have survived in pockets somewhere and migrated out or whatever. Many of the small animals reproduce at an incredibly faster rate than the larger animals. That might have helped their survival. We already talked about why cold-blooded animals can survive catastrophes better. They don't need to eat as much. They can really go for long periods. Humans are the ultimate survivors. We are the ultimate survivors because we're the ultimate generalists. We will live anywhere. We'll eat almost anything. People will eat rutabagas. They eat artichokes. They eat snails, skunk cabbage. My wife eats skunk cabbage. What's that about? People eat ding-dongs and ho-hos. They'll eat anything. We can overcome almost any obstacle, and we can adapt and survive in almost any environment. So humans so far have been some of the ultimate survivors. Now, we may be our own worst enemy in the long term as we continue to ruin the earth because only so much the earth can handle. Some areas, local extinctions of small animals may have occurred and many migrated back, and we talked about that. So we're going to look a little bit further. 3 of the 4 larger survivors needed our help to survive. So the American black bear has a large geographic range that far exceeds Florida's boundaries. They're not endangered yet. Placed on the endangered species list, the manatee's long-term survival is doubtful out in the wild due to environmental degradation and increased boat traffic. Long-term survival of the Florida panther is also doubtful and will need it's needed human assistance already, and it might need even more human assistance if it's going to make it to the next century, out in the wild or not. The alligator was once an endangered species list, but with human protection has made one of the greatest comebacks in wildlife history, to the point where they're almost a menace again. We need to become better stewards of our environment if we want to see these creatures continue to survive in the wild. Unlike the Ice Age extinctions, we know the cause of the extinctions now. It's people and our behaviors and what's going on. There's no question about it. We are causing this 6th mass extinction on Earth. So we're up to the question and answer period. I'm not sure how I did time-wise. I think I did all right. Might have went a little quick. We'll see if any answers come in while you're looking at some fossils. Most of them are from the Mammoth Hole. That was a segment I did on Channel 10 about 2 or 3 years ago for the to promote Fossil Fest. You're looking at a mammoth tibia, which is not one of the bigger mammoth bones I found there. There's a vertebrae, a tooth. Way out to the left is actually some taper jaws that were just mixed in with all those mammoth material. Some mammoth toe bones, partial rib bone. You can see it's fairly large. There's a shark tooth, a big meg tooth, because if you're doing a TV segment, you gotta bring a meg tooth. So I did not find that in with the mammoth material. That was, like I said, a Channel 10 news segment. Do we have any questions?
Well, Dr. Bob, we are on a delay. So what you're saying here will take a few minutes to come across here. So if you got a joke, give it about 30 seconds and we'll catch up to respond for questions.
Oh boy.
No, you don't tell a joke.
Oh, they have a joke.
No, absolutely not. Just sit there and look pretty until we see if anything comes
Not
across.
on the thing.
That's her. Don't touch the screen. Don't touch nothing, Bob. Let's see here. While we're waiting, I will see if any questions come across. Want to say hi to a few more people. We have I got 4 of my nieces and nephews watching from Michigan: Steve, Sarah, Chris, and Alexis. I love you guys. We have Russ and Cindy from Tampa. A lot of people always ask me how many people are watching. Even though it only shows 31 people, I've gone on and looked at the people who are watching. I've done an estimate. We got about 60, 65 people watching because I know which people have multiple people in their house, and there's 4 of us too, so pushing 70 people. So that's a good turnout tonight. I'm not seeing any questions come across. So Dr. Bob, if you'll give up that seat for a minute, if any questions come across, we'll bring you back. Thank you very much for your presentation.
I'd like to thank my wife for making blueberry cobbler here for the after party.
Yes.
And we'll move on from here.
Just think Mary Sinibaldi in general. In general.
All right, Mike's got it.
George and Glenn Overhauls and Audrey watching from I don't know where they're from. George, Zephyr Hills. The Purple Crow watching from Texas. Vivian and Ed from Michigan, right in Florida. Lexus Brito, good meeting. All right, so if any questions come across, we'll grab them. I'm going to give away the prizes now. Can you fix my screen? Dr. Bob just dropped a 32-ounce Coke on his laptop. That's not going to work out. T. We will have Dr. Bob back, hopefully sooner than later, whenever the book is released. And I'm only going to give my phone number out one time. And that'll be, so make sure you have a pen or paper or ready to dial. Where's my phone? And I'll be challenged with the delay because, all right, don't call yet. Give me a second, but it's. I'll remind you guys, this is our last meeting for the season. Hopefully we'll start back up in September. Keep your fingers crossed we go back to USF. It shouldn't rain much more for the next few weeks, so try to get out in the rivers and find some fossils yourself. There'll be no newsletter during June, July, and August, so if you join the club right away, don't panic when you don't get a newsletter right off the bat. The first or the next newsletter will be in September. So that being said, we will give our first prize away. We're going to give away this Archaeopteryx replica. Remember, it's not the $10 million version. It's just a plaster, one drop, you drop it. It's on your own. You're on your own. So I'll take the third caller for the Archaeopteryx. First caller is Phil Matthews. Waiting for another caller. There is a delay you have to deal with. Third caller. That's weird. Last month my phone started there. Andy Ingleson, you're the second caller. Hello. Who is this? Hello. Oh. Hello, can you hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. I think I'd be better prepared. One second. Hey, who is this? Chris from Michigan. It's delayed, so it's screwing me up. But you guys won the Archaeopteryx, so we'll get that in the mail to you guys. Thanks for playing, guys. Love you. Gotta go. Next, we are taking the third caller for the crocodile scoot. First caller is Steve Vicari, number one caller. Goodbye. Rain, you're the second caller. Maddie, you are the third caller. You won. You've been a multiple, a 2 or 3 time winner. You won the crocodile scoop. So good deal. All right, I'll see you. Bye-bye. Yeah, you write these down. You won the Chris Searle. We're doing the ads first. Oh, you're the first caller. Going for the third. Andrew, you're the second caller. We're going for the third. A little more complicated than it looks when these phone calls start coming across. Rain, you won. You won the ads. We'll get that to you. Thank you. Have a good day. Write your name down so I don't forget. Thank you. Another multiple winner. All right, we're going for the little replica skull, which is an actual size. Nancy, you're number one. We're going for number 3. Next caller. This is Marlon. Marlon, you're number 2. We're going for number 3. Phil Mathis. You there, buddy? Nope, you won, Phil. This is okay, everybody stop calling. This is Phil Mathis, right? All right, I got you, buddy. We'll write you down. You won the Raptor skull replica. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, we got 2 questions coming in. Turn that off because we're done with that. All right, Bob, take your seat back. I'm going to let Bob finish it, wrap it up. We got a couple of questions, and I want to thank you guys for putting up with everything we had going on this year. I can honestly tell you we did our best all the way up to the cancellation of the Peace River Mini Adventure. We tried, it just didn't work out. We did get a few field trips in. The meetings this year, I think, have been pretty good. We've had speakers from all over the country and some local. And I thank everybody, and I think everybody behind the scenes that helps run TBFC through the year. And even though we were virtual, there were a lot of folks that helped get things on, especially Eileen doing our IT on the other side. She has our website. We appreciate Eileen. This wouldn't have happened without you because I don't know how to do this anymore, and Dr. Bob does. So I'll give Dr. Bob a chair. Thank you guys and good night. But don't hang up because Bob's going to answer some questions. All right, Dr. Bob.
All right, I'm back. What's up?
Any idea why the extinctions occurred in North America and not in Europe or Asia?
Yes, I think the extinctions occurring in North America at a much higher rate than Europe or Asia probably had to do with the people. I think it's a big support why people and their dogs came over from Europe and Asia and brought those diseases and stuff with them. I really think there's a lot to that and causing a much greater, because the animals that evolved here did not evolve with those types of diseases. And understand the land bridges were not a single item. Horses, mammoths, mastodons, the animals going across went across way before bison were going back and forth, way before modern humans started coming in. So they were already, the horse and that kind of stuff were already established and had some immunity over in Asia and Africa or whatever else. The African thing, because that's the cradle of man, they've had the longest survivorship along with modern humans. So they would have been more leery of modern humans and this and that. So they think there's a lot to do with that. Hopefully that's the best answer I can give. And I think that's where kind of science is right now for the most part.
Thank you. That was from Sylvia Russo. Thank you. We got two questions from Heidi Kleber. You mentioned manatees declining. Is there any way humans could plant more of their natural foods in those areas where the food supplies are threatened?
Well, that's a great question, and that's probably a great suggestion. I think boat traffic is one of the main issues for affecting manatees because they're really getting hurt. We know that the red tides really affected the manatees and even the dolphin, so food isn't going to help that. One of the issues is we can plant, I've seen on the Rainbow where they've taken whole swaths of that river and planted stuff off to the side of the river. And it looks like most of those areas, those plants did take, although I've never seen, I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen a manatee in the Rainbow. I'm sure they've been in there, but I found tons of manatee remains in there. So I think that's a great suggestion. Yes, fossilized manatee remains in the Rainbow. I think that's a great suggestion. And I think anything we can do to help would be good. A lot of what's happening in the rivers, I just ran across this in the National Federation Wildlife magazine. They're talking about springs nationwide, but I'm sure Florida is this. You see this slick, greasy, slimy stuff that grows on the seaweed or the plants that are in the rivers now. The Peace River's loaded with it. Sections of the Steenhatchee that it just has all this slime that it makes it almost impossible for these plant life to survive in those rivers. And I know the Itchituckney's been massively affected by it. So I don't know that strictly planting this stuff in the rivers means that this stuff is going to totally survive, depending on what kind of boat traffic is dragging stuff in and out, what kind of pollution, and what's causing such a loss of plant habitat in those rivers. But that's a great suggestion, and hopefully somebody's working on something to help.
Another from the same person, Heidi Kleber. What does the fossil record seem to indicate as far as early hominids? Any proto-humans, Australopithecus types, or were the paleo-humans the earliest found so far?
Yeah, so far there's zero evidence of anything other than modern humans in North America, South America, period. So even people that want to go with a pre-Clovis thing, so if they want to push it back farther than the 15,000, they want to push it back to 20, even 30,000, modern humans evolved around 200,000 years ago. No scientist, no amateur, nobody is trying to push the hominid record in the New World past, say, 30 or 35,000 years. So they would all have been modern humans. Modern humans have been around a long time. We know they overlap with Neanderthals for tens of thousands of years. People have had their genetic stuff traced or whatever now, and almost everyone that gets it back has 2% or 3% Neanderthal somewhere in their DNA. So we're all part cave people, I guess. But overall, they were still modern humans. And even if you look at Neanderthals, their time range is still also in that modern human range. And there's no evidence of anything resembling a Neanderthal. There's nothing even resembling Cro-Magnon, which would have been kind of early, just pre-modern human. Nothing resembling anything like that in North or South America.
Patty Moore is asking, how do you catalog / number your finds?
Oh, that's a great question, because I'm a compulsive, obsessive compulsive about cataloging. So when I first got into it, the first few things I threw in a different collecting box. I had a Lysy box, I had a Rainbow River box, I had a Peace River box. And I think that was I think I was also doing some Apollo Beach stuff occasionally. And then I realized the importance of cataloging. So my catalogs, I started way early before I lost control of my collections. And it's strictly a chronological number. So the very first, I put 4 pieces of information. I paint a little white label. The first thing is going to be a letter: P for Peace River, PB, Peace Bank, A for Apollo Beach, stuff like that, ST for Steenhatchee River, SF for Santa Fe River. So the first thing on my labels will have a letter that stands for the site. Then there's a dash. Then there's a chronological number. So the first thing I ever found, it actually says N for Naples. We were down in Naples Beach, Florida, and I found a little shark tooth. So it has N. I think I started it with 01 or maybe even 001, because I might have had close to 100 fossils at the time before I started realizing it. But I had them all in different boxes, so I knew where they were from. That was important. So it said N-01, first fossil I found. The next thing underneath the letter for the location are my initials, RS, because they want to know who found it. Then there's a dash, and then there's a date. It's usually the month and the year. So it'll say 6/93 or something like that, if it was in June of 93 that I found that. So stuff now has 4, I'm up to, I think, 8,900 and something like that fossils that I have logged in. Most of them are still in my house. I've donated 300 or 400 items to University of Florida. But most of the stuff I own, I've given some stuff away, donated stuff that was not scientific, meg teeth, that kind of thing. So they always have that. I then handwrite them into a journal. So if I need to look up, like on this book that's coming out, Ice Age Florida, on every animal, there's a story about the day in the life of that animal. And then there is a discovery narrative of how I found the fossils that led me to write that story. So I can pull that fossil up, look at the chronological number, go to all my handwritten catalogs, go right back to the narrative that I write every time I dive. I dry my fossils out, I write the dive up, I then treat them if they need treatment. I then paint my labels, label them, catalog them, put them wherever I put them on my shelves if they're display worthy. If not, they go into different storage areas depending on what I have and where I found it. And so it's very easy for me to look up. The reason it's important to catalog and label your fossils is that if something has any scientific relevance, they almost won't even accept it at the university level. Now, they may accept it to put in their collections. They're not going to publish on it if it's not cataloged correctly, labeled correctly, and they know that this is absolutely where it came from. I had written an article for the Tampa Bay Fossil Chronicles 30 years ago saying, so suppose somebody was to study horses and they put a call out for horse teeth, and people say, oh, why would you label your horse teeth? And I label all my big meg teeth also. Why would you label your? They're so common, this and that. And sure enough, years later, Dr. Holbert finally decides he's going to sort out Ice Age horses in Florida to determine if it's 1, 2, or 3 species. He puts a call out, comes to my house, and picks out 350 or 400 horse teeth. And he had criteria. They had to be perfect. The occlusal surface had to be perfect. They had to be perfect all the way down to the root. They had to be labeled. They had to be cataloged or whatever. And I donated all those horse teeth so he could study and add to, I don't know how many thousands of horse teeth he went through. And I don't want to say my portion of the collection was a tenth of it, because they had tons of horse teeth also at the University of Florida collections. But he was able to accept anything from me because he knew that I was obsessive about labeling and cataloging all my fossils. So importance of information, location letter, chronological number, finder, not as important, and date, not as important. Because if I have that chronological number, if I have a really small, you saw the turtle skull, there's only the 4 numbers across it. Because the turtle skull is so small, I can look up that chronological number and then find out the date it was found and all the other information in my catalog. That stuff, the journal that I put it into. So that chronological number is the most important, location next most important. My initials are the least most important. I'd like to think I'm important, but I'm not in the sense of things. That answers that question.
All right, we got a couple side questions in the meantime. One, Vivian is asking, will there be another mini adventure? We hope not. We're hoping to go full-blown Peace River adventure next April. Hopefully our country will be in a different place almost a year from into the future. We'll see what happens, but we plan on having a real Peace River adventure next year. We also plan on having a real Fossil Fest next year. We're certainly all looking forward to that. Side question also that Bob can answer since he goes down there a lot. Heidi Kleber's asking, is the Nocatee boat ramp a good place to scout from to find fossils? I'm near there now, thanks.
Yeah, Nocatee boat ramp is great. I would go upriver from the boat ramp. You'll find some fairly shallow gravel areas. Also from the main boat ramp in Arcadia near the canoe outpost, there's some really good areas there. Again, upriver. Downriver, it seems to obviously gets deeper. But the few times that I went downriver from Nocatee, every time I went, I ran into a gator. It's just the way it is. It doesn't mean there's stuff there, and I've found stuff there. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit scarier. So, but Nocatee, you can weave up the knot from Nocatee for several miles, especially if you had a canoe, and find gravel bed after gravel bed after gravel bed. And I think the farther you get away from the boat ramp, the better your chances are. But you can, when the river's low enough, you can walk that whole thing. I don't know that it's low enough yet, but there's times when the river gets really low that you can walk literally several miles. You might have to cross the river and on the shallow part, cross back and forth, but you can get pretty far upriver.
Some folks are posting on here about taking care of the river, not digging in the banks, taking trash out with you when you go. That is a good reminder. As you know, there's been a lot of talk. They just closed a lot of the Gainesville creeks because people were tearing them up. And I can tell you, if you have a big bin of garbage you've collected out of the river, it will certainly go over much better when the wildlife officers pull you over to look at your fossil permit. It changes their whole attitude when they see you're cleaning up the river and not digging 3 feet above the water line. Another question for Bob: how do you dry out your larger fossil bones? Is there a preferred method? That's from Rick.
Okay, the biggest things for drying out fossils, whether they're small or large, is let nature do it slow. It's been buried for 10,000, 100,000, a million years. You do not need to put it in your oven. You do not need to put it in a microwave. You do not need to put it in the sun. In your garage, on a porch, I usually put it on a towel or I have those big platter things that people get like vegetables on from Publix or whatever, and I'll sort my fossils out on those. And I usually try to put it, I have a fossil room Thank you to my wife, Mary, for that. That I do have an area up there that's in the air conditioner, but the idea is to dry them out relatively slowly. The larger the bone, the longer it takes. So when I found those big mammoth leg bones, especially the femur and the humerus, those took several months in my garage because they were too big to put in the house, especially the femur came out in a single piece. So it was 57 inches. That's a big bone. That's almost 5 feet of bone and probably close to 100, maybe over 100 pounds because it was wet. So that went on. I had to actually get a piece of plywood, put it on top of a rolling cart, put towels. I had to prop it up so that it would be, so it wasn't just laying on the two end joints, because in case it was too heavy, it would collapse in because you weren't sure how it was going to. So I propped it all up and I let that thing dry out probably for 4 or 5 months. And then if you treat them, I end up, when you get that Pleistocene stuff, that mammal stuff, you got to treat it. Usually with some type of either Bootvar or Vinac, one of those type of things. You mix it with acetone. You got to do it in an aerated area. If it's not dried out well, whatever you're treating with, it's going to milk up. And then you really got to let it dry out. So if it milks up, then you got to remove whatever you were treating with. You really got to, if you're finding the large bones, mammoth, mastodon, big sloth material, takes a long time. You know, like I said, it laid in the river 10,000, 100,000 or underground, million years. You're not going to dry it out in 2 days. Just take your time. If you're going to work on it, especially treating it, this and that, take your time with it.
All right. That appears to be the last question coming across. So I want to thank Dr. Bob one last time. Dr. Bob, anytime I ask Dr. Bob for anything, he's always there to help, whether it's doing a presentation. He's drove with me to pick things up before he drove with me to Fort Myers one time, just so I would have to go alone to pick up some books. So I appreciate Dr. Bob and everything he does. I thank all you folks for tuning in tonight, and please look for your September newsletter. Keep watching us on Facebook. Make sure you like the YouTube channel there. We'd appreciate that. It helps get its credit on YouTube somehow. I don't know how that magic works. Eileen does always like to have people like the channel. And thank you very much. I'll let Bob close us out for the season.
Well, I'm going to close it out by first, again, also thanking Eileen for doing this, because like Mike said, I'm the least technologically savvy person with my little flip phone and whatever else. And it's been a big part of my life for, I guess, over 30 years now, the Tampa Bay Fossil Club. So I thank the members that have supported me over the years and supported my book. This new book, the last little plug for it, the price on it is scary at $79. However, it's coming out as an ebook also for $10. I've never even owned an ebook, but I had to do something to make it affordable for other people, because to me that was just a big commitment. I'm not sure I would buy my own book at that price, but it's got a lot of, it's 11 by 14 and a lot of huge art mural pictures. So whenever you do an art book with all that color and the murals and this and that, and I want to say there's 40 big full-page murals by Herman that are just killer. It just shot the price up, and we had all to do. Initially, it came out at $97. I'm like, no, I'm not going to buy a book from Bob Bacher for $97. Never mind from me. So we try to get the price down. I think it's worth buying the hard copy, but if you can't, the ebook, hopefully we get it out in 4 to 6 months. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in, and those that might show up on YouTube later. And we'll go from there. And hopefully in the fall, we all get back together again.
So I just wanted to also say, for those that were wondering if we're going to continue doing live streams even after we go back to in person, I'm going to do my best to try to make that happen. It'll depend on either USF's Wi-Fi or if I can get a reliable hotspot. But I know a lot of people that are out of state may want to be able to listen. So we'll see if we can make it happen. Have a great rest of your season.